Okay, next we have Kylee Hoelscher, who is reading a chapter from her novel in progress. Her novel is about the relationship between two sisters that changes dramatically when one of them has a miscarriage when she is 6 months pregnant.
Lacey pulled into the parking lot of her doctor's office. Thanks. Lacey pulled into the parking lot of her doctor's office and looked for a spot. There should be special pregnant parking for ladies, she said. Amen, I said. We stalked the parking lot and waited for someone to come out of the office. Of course, here everyone would have priority. True, Lacey said as she followed a pregnant lady walking out to her car. The lady got into her minivan and started to pull out. Score, Lacey said. Want to bet this is her first kid, I asked. Shut up, Lacey said. I was teasing her because she and Mark had bought a minivan last week. I had been mocking her relentlessly since she'd brought it home and installed the infant seat. She was only 6 months pregnant, but she was ready to bring the baby home tomorrow, and clearly 5 of his friends because they had seating for 8 now. I got out of the car and opened the back door to get Nathaniel. I hadn't heard him in a while, so I figured he had fallen asleep in the 45 minutes it had taken to get us to the doctor. Although there were plenty of overly qualified OBGYNs 5 minutes from her house, Lacey had chosen one in Santa Monica, so every time she went to the doctor, she made me come with her, and then we went to go get lunch on 3rd Street. Normally, Mark joined us for the doctor appointment and then headed back to work. But today he had a lunch with clients, so we promised to try to capture a face shot for him. I peeked into the car seat and saw Nathaniel chewing on his stuffed giraffe, his eyes wide open. Do you ever sleep? I asked. Jeez. What? Lacey asked. He's awake, I said. I swear this kid requires no sleep. Lacey opened the trunk to get the stroller. Leave it, I said. I'm just going to wear him. You're sure? Lacey asked. Yeah, I said. That waiting room is tiny. I pulled the ergo from the back seat and strapped it on. Then I pulled Nathaniel out of his seat and squished him into the carrier. Now go to sleep, I said. I grabbed the blanket from his car seat and nestled it around him, hiding his eyes from any possible distractions. Ready? Lacey asked. Yep, I said. I grabbed the diaper bag and pushed the button on the door, watching the door slide shut by itself. Lacey caught me watching. See, she said, convenient. No way in hell, I said. I drove an SUV, but I'd always driven one. I wasn't one of those new parents who rushed out to buy an SUV or minivan the second the 2 pink lines appeared on the stick. We crossed the parking lot and entered the lobby. Lacey checked her watch. I'm hungry, she said. She walked toward the cafe. You want something? I shook my head. I have a bar in my bag, thanks. I'd never gotten my appetite back after having Nathaniel. When I'd been pregnant with him, I just ate to alleviate the nausea by a degree. Now I just ate to survive. Of course, that gave my mom even more ammunition in her arsenal of complaints about my parenting. She said if my breast milk were more fatty, Nathaniel wouldn't have to eat so often and would sleep more. I walked around the lobby, swaying, hoping Nathaniel would fall asleep. Today was ultrasound day, and I didn't want to be stuck in the hallway with a screaming baby instead of looking at my nephew on the screen. Lacey came out of the cafe with a banana and a container of yogurt, and we headed upstairs. We walked into the waiting room of the doctor's office and looked for 2 chairs next to each other. There were 3 other pregnant ladies there, and they were spread out on all 3 sides of the room. Each of them had their faces buried in a baby magazine. I'm going to stand, I said. I want Nathaniel to fall asleep anyway. Lacey nodded. She went to sign in and then went in the back to pee. I stood, rocking side to side, peering in at Nathaniel every few minutes to see if his eyes looked droopy. They didn't. Lacey came back into the waiting room and grabbed a baby magazine before sitting down. Where do you want to eat after this? I asked. I don't know, she said, opening the magazine. I pulled out my phone and clicked on my Yelp app. Burger, salad, sandwich, what? I asked. Lacey looked up and rolled her eyes. You're addicted. You realize that, right? She was talking about Yelp. Shut up, I said. What do you want? I'm not eating meat this week, so look for a vegetarian place, she said, not looking up from her magazine. It was my turn to roll my eyes. She and Mark vacillated between being vegans, vegetarians, or meat eaters so often it was hard to keep up. She had always been like that, following whatever food fad was going on at the moment. She had always carried between 5 and 10 extra pounds and was always looking for new ways to lose them. Now that she was pregnant, she counted every calorie to make sure she wouldn't gain more than the 20 recommended pounds. I typed in vegetarian lunch, not excited by the possibility. I took after our dad and never held on to an extra pound, so I just ate whatever I wanted. Her constant diet restrictions were exhausting. I clicked on the first link. It had 4 stars and over 700 reviews, so it met my first criteria. I never eat anywhere under 4 stars, and there has to be at least 100 reviews. Anyone can find 15 friends to rate their restaurant. I saw chicken, salad, and hummus on the first few reviews, so I figured we were safe. There's a place called True Food Kitchen, I said. Lacey looked up from her magazine. Oh, I heard about that place. It's supposed to be good. Oh, it's at the mall, though, I said. That's fine, Lacey said. I wanted to go to Nordstrom anyway. Do you have time? I shrugged. Sure, Mama's picking Stella up from preschool. I'll just tell her to put her down for a nap at her house. I closed the Yelp app and went back to my texts. I quickly typed out a message to my mom. A thought occurred to me, and not for the first time. I had had exclusive babysitting rights to my parents for the past 4 years. In 3 months, that would all change. Soon my kids would have competition, in all ways. The door to the back opened, and a young blonde girl leaned out. Lacey Miller, she said, with that cheerful smile all OBGYN and pediatrician employees have. Lacey stood, and I followed her into the hallway. Hi, I'm Carrie, she said, holding the door open so we could pass. Lacey walked over to the scale. Judgment time, she said, grimacing. Come on, Lace, I said. 130, Carrie said. Lacey smiled. Not bad, she said. Yeah, I said, waiting for her to put her shoes back on. I had put on 40 pounds with both of my pregnancies, and it looked like she would hit her goal of 20. Mine had been mostly water weight, though. Nathaniel started to fuss, and I scooted out of the way as Lacey got up on the exam table. Carrie took Lacey's temperature. Nathaniel went from fussing to crying almost immediately, as usual. I quickly unbuckled him from the carrier and took him out. Carrie wrapped the blood pressure cuff around Lacey's arm and watched the clock. I looked up at the clock, too. Nathaniel was probably hungry. Okay. I sat in the chair and fumbled with my nursing bra while trying to keep him from kicking himself off my lap and landing headfirst on the linoleum. Lacey watched him with her typical amusement. You know, if your milk was more fatty, she joked. Ha, I said, when I finally got him latched and he calmed down. Your turn will come, and then Mom can give you all kinds of helpful advice, too. Of course, my mom's advice would be much different for Lacey. Lacey wouldn't make all the mistakes I did. Carrie unwrapped the blood pressure cuff with a loud rip that made Nathaniel jump. Shh, I said, patting his butt. Sorry, Carrie said. She wrote down the results and looked torn for a moment. Are you feeling okay today? She asked Lacey. Yes, fine, Lacey said, her face changing as well. Carrie hesitated another minute and wrapped the cuff around her arm again. I'm just going to do this again. She looked at Lacey. Do you mind? I just want to make sure I did it right. Lacey nodded. Breathe naturally, Carrie said. I watched Lacey's face as she watched Carrie's. I couldn't tell if she was worried Carrie was doing it wrong or worried about the results. It was a long 60 seconds. I looked from Carrie's face to Lacey's. I could see a million things running through Lacey's mind. She Googled symptoms every day, and I knew she was just waiting to hear what Carrie would say so she could look it up. Nathaniel had drained one breath, so I quickly moved him to the other before he could make a noise. Carrie looked at the reading, frowned, and wrote it down. She looked at Lacey, saw the expression on her face, and smiled. Just a little high, she said brightly. She reassumed her medical briskness. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. She reached under the table and pulled out a paper sheet. Now, remove all your clothing from the waist down. You know the drill, She paused. When you're undressed, go ahead and lay on your left side while you wait for the doctor. Sometimes moms get a little nervous when they come to the doctor. If you lay on your left side, it helps bring your blood pressure down. She whipped the curtain closed and quickly opened the door. She bustled out, and Lacey and I were left in silence. Hand me my phone, Lacey said. I grabbed her bag and rifled through it to get her phone, trying not to jostle Nathaniel too much. I put the phone in her waiting hand. She tapped furiously on it, then scanned through the results. I'm sure it's nothing, I said. Remember, this happened to me with Nathaniel. Almost as reflex, I pulled him closer to me. And remember, it was nothing. When I was 8 months pregnant, I had gone in for a normal checkup, and my blood pressure had been through the roof. The doctor had sent me immediately to the emergency room with the terrifying possibility that I had preeclampsia, a condition that would put you on bed rest, or worse, make them take the baby early. Paul had rushed from the office, met me at the hospital, and we waited an anxious hour for the doctor on duty to tell me my blood pressure had returned to normal and it was okay to go home. Preeclampsia, hypertension, she mumbled as she read through. I gently unlatched Nathaniel from my breast and carefully maneuvered him into the carrier again. Lacey, I said, standing up and touching her arm. Relax, it's nothing. I handed her the gown. Get undressed and lay on your side. Lacey held onto her phone for another minute and then handed it to me. She got undressed. She lay down on the exam table on her left side and began breathing deeply. I stood beside the table, gently swaying to keep Nathaniel asleep. Do you want some water? I asked. Lacey nodded. I moved the curtain aside and went out the door. I walked down the hallway to the water cooler and filled a cup with cold water. I saw Carrie talking to the doctor. Carrie handed the doctor the chart, and the doctor began walking my way. I turned around and walked back to Lacey's room. Here you go, I said, handing her the water. I think your doctor's on her way. A couple of seconds passed until we heard the soft knock on the door, followed by the doctor peeking in. Hi, Dr. Green, said Lacey. How are you feeling? A little nervous. She looked from Dr. Green to the chart. She said my blood pressure was high. I sat down on the chair to get out of the doctor's way. Dr. Green sat down on her stool and scooted over to the exam table. She looked at Lacey's chart. Your blood pressure was a little elevated today, she corrected, not high. She read through the chart again. Weight gain is good. She scanned more of the chart and looked up. Lacey still looked worried, and the doctor said, Don't worry, we'll check your blood pressure again at the end to make sure it's okay. She smiled. I usually find it seems to resolve itself after Mom has seen her baby. She gestured to the ultrasound machine. Okay, let's get you turned on your back and take a listen. The paper crackled as Lacey scooted from her side to her back. Dr. Green squirted the gel on Lacey's belly and used her wand to spread it around. She clicked on the machine, and the loud whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound of a fetal heartbeat filled the room. Sounds good. Baby moving around? Dr. Green asked, clicking off the machine. Yes, Lacey answered automatically, smiling. Then her face changed. Actually, I don't know if I felt him much today. Well, he's getting bigger. There's less room for him to move around in there, Dr. Green said. She turned on the ultrasound machine and used the wand to spread some more gel around. Let me get some measurements first, then we'll try to get a good look at him for some pictures. She clicked around the images, drawing lines and capturing shots. A foot kicked. See, there you go, she said. He's moving. Lacey smiled. I pushed back Nathaniel's blanket and saw that his eyes were still closed. I turned back toward the monitor, anxious to see Ben, but found myself watching Dr. Green instead. Dr. Green moved the wand around on Lacey's belly some more and frowned. Lacey was watching the monitor, but I saw it. The change in the doctor's face. I moved closer to the screen. I hope we get his face today. Mark has a frame on his desk just waiting for a face shot, Lacey said, turning her face away from the monitor and to the doctor's face. What? She asked. Her voice changed. What's wrong? Dr. Green wiped the gel off the wand and set it back on the stand. I just want to check something, she said. She rifled through Lacey's file and pulled out the previous ultrasound scans. She looked carefully at one. She put it down and picked up another one. She held it closer to her face. My heart sunk at what she could have seen on the monitor. The first time I saw Stella's face in an ultrasound, her nose was in shadow, so it looked like it was missing. Initially, I thought she was going to be born without a nose, and I had nightmares about it for my entire pregnancy, even after the subsequent ultrasounds where you could clearly see she had a nose. Dr. Green, Lacey asked. I'm sorry, Dr. Green said, straightening up. I don't think we ever got a good scan of his head before. She squirted more gel in Lacey's stomach and started over with the wand. This time she went straight for Ben's head. She rubbed the wand over and over his head from all angles, clicking and drawing lines. She scribbled notes on Lacey's chart. Finally, she turned off the machine and swiveled her stool to face Lacey. What's wrong? Lacey asked. Dr. Green used a towel to wipe the gel off Lacey's stomach and offered Lacey her arm to help her sit up. Okay, I don't want to scare you, so I just need you to listen to what I'm saying, and then we'll go from there. I stood up and quickly walked over to Lacey, grabbing her hand. Lacey's eyes were focused on Dr. Green's face. A million things raced through my brain this time. I had seen his arms and legs, so I knew he wasn't missing a limb. We had heard his heartbeat, so he was alive. His head. She was looking at his head. I flashed back to Stella's skeleton face and shook the thought away immediately. It looks like the baby may have some swelling on his brain. She pulled out the ultrasound images she had printed. You see, here, she pointed to Ben's head. I don't know if Lacey knew what she should be looking at because I didn't. Dr. Green had drawn a white arrow pointing to something, but I couldn't tell if it was the dark spot or the light spot I was supposed to be looking at. I hadn't been following what the doctor had been saying, but when I looked up from the ultrasound picture, I knew all I needed to know by looking at Lacey. Lacey swallowed hard, and I saw tears starting in her eyes. What does that mean? She asked. I'm going to call the hospital and figure out what the next step is. We need to rule out a couple of things before we panic, okay? Lacey pulled her hand out of mine and wiped her eyes. Now? She asked. You're going to call them now? Dr. Green nodded. She closed Lacey's chart. Sit down, she said. I'll be right back. She walked out of the room and Lacey got off the table. She ripped the gown off and used it to wipe the gel off her stomach. She pulled her clothes back on and reached for her phone. She had the ultrasound picture in her hand as she was typing information from it into her phone. Enlarged ventricle, 16 millimeters, in utero, she said as she typed. She was crying and tears were dripping onto her phone. I'll call Mark, I said. Should I call Mark? She nodded, so I pulled out my cell. Mark, I said when he answered. Hey, Sarah, she said. You need to get to the doctor's office. I turned my body slightly away from Lacey. There's something wrong.